Welcome, folks. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes to see if anyone else is joining us. It might be a really small crowd today, which is totally fine. This will be recorded and posted on our YouTube StarNet channel, as well as on our StarNet webinar page. And also the recording will be found in the link bank, which I'll go ahead and enter to the chat right now. And we will begin in just a few minutes.
Hello, Carolyn, Cass, and Catherine. Thanks for joining.
All the C names.
I know. We promise we won't we won't call on you the whole webinar, even, if it's a small group. It's not like, sometimes you go to a conference session at a conference and you walk in and it's a small group and they say, okay, it's going to be a really interactive session. You're like, oh, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. Or you're in a Zoom meeting and they're like, it's time for breakout
Time for
rooms.
breakout rooms, right?
Please
Yep.
unmute yourself and discuss. We will not be doing any of that today. We just want to share some cool science facts, the history of some really cool innovations of the Southwest, and share some resources that are free and available for you to download and use in your library program. So we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and tell you guys the icebreaker today. It's what is a scientific achievement or like an invention from your town? I know we have it on a slide coming up, but you might, if you're like me, you might want to frantically Google something to figure yours out. But yeah, again, it's what is a scientific achievement from your community? Or it could be like your general region, your general area.
Yeah, so think about that as we get started. So welcome to the webinar, Science in America, Innovations of the Southwest. As I mentioned before, this webinar is recorded. You can find it on our YouTube channel as well as our StarNet webinar archive page, and it will be posted in the link bank, which I'm going to put in the chat one more time. So all of the resources that we'll be covering today, you can find the links directly in that one spot in that link bank there. So, my name is Claire Ratcliffe-Adams. I work at the Space Science Institute as an education associate, and I'm also the PI for the We Are Water project, which will just kind of where all of these resources came from. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And I'm also joined by Brooks Mitchell. Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, yes, I am Brooks Mitchell, education associate at the Space Science Institute. We have worked with public libraries for like, gosh, 10 years. I don't know, a long time. I've only been at SSI for 7 or 8 years. But maybe, yeah, you've maybe been involved with one of our projects before. You're a part of the StarNet newsletter or the StarNet community. So yeah, we love working with public libraries.
Yeah, and we are also joined with our colleague Amy Briones. She's in the chat, so she can be dropping links, kind of managing the chat, but she is our wonderful graphic designer. So she is what makes all of our products look professional. And we're just so lucky to have her talent on our team.
And we need all the help we can get sometimes, Claire. So
We really do. So just a quick agenda. We might not need the full hour for this today, but we're going to start with that icebreaker that Brooks mentioned that some of you are already putting in the chat. But what is an innovation or a scientific achievement or an invention that occurred in your community? I'll give a quick overview of the We Are Water project, which is now coming to an end. But we wanted to celebrate that region. The We Are Water project is all about the Four Corners region of the United States. So we're going to share a few of the scientific achievements or discoveries, whatever word you want to use, of the Southwest, including Acequias, the levitator that came out of Durango, Colorado, and waffle gardening, which is a centuries old agricultural technique that's still being used today. We're going to showcase two activities that you can utilize in your own programs. And end with a discussion. All right, so Brooks, take it away.
Yeah, okay. There's some good stuff here. So we already talked about it. What's an invention or scientific achievement from your community? I am in the Front Range of Colorado right now, Longmont, Colorado. I was just doing a little bit of research. It looks like a couple of years ago there was a something was invented to help monitor your brain's core temperature. It said it was for maybe people with like heart issues or some kind of a aortic issue. But it was like a non-invasive, non-surgical way that they can monitor your brain temperature, which I thought was really cool. There's a lot of big science and STEM and big industries and organizations all around, but it's cool to find one that was like, I think, invented just a couple of miles from my house right now. Um, Claire, did you find something good for Westminster?
Well, actually, I put the picture you see up here. This is from when I lived in Jackson, Wyoming. I was
Oh,
in Wyoming before I came down to Colorado. And this is called the vertical farm or the vertical garden. So Jackson, Wyoming has very few months out of the year where you can grow food, but there's still a lot of people and you need to be able to have food. And instead of trying to ship food from Mexico and across the country, a group got together not too long ago, I'd say like 20 years ago or so, and put together this hydroponic growing facility. So the city of Jackson was looking for something to do on a really small patch of land. And so the funders of the vertical garden proposed, hey, let's use it to grow food. We have this crazy idea. We can use hydroponics. So they're not using soil, but they're using water with nutrients to grow plants vertically. And I volunteered there when I was living there. And it's absolutely incredible. I'd walk in there in February and it was nice and warm. They had, indeterminate tomato plants just growing stories tall in this building. So they're able to use that food. They donate a lot of it to the local food bank. They use it in the, Michelin star restaurants that they have around there. But it's really exciting and just like a really innovative way to solve that problem of how do we grow local food in a place with very few growing months. Um,
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome. Amy, I don't know if we told you about this, but you need to be thinking about El Paso and what amazing science has come out of El Paso. Catherine from Rexburg, is that Rexburg, Idaho, Catherine? I'm acting like I didn't just Google Rexburg and like I just have a good infinite geography knowledge. So okay, next door, Rigby is the birthplace of Philo Farnsworth. At first, I thought I saw that and I thought, oh, maybe she didn't understand the question. She's putting in like a TV star or something like that. And then I looked up. That's like he helped create the television, like the inventor of the television. So that I would say is a
Wow.
pretty big deal. That's something that's affected all of our lives,
Oh
and
yeah.
you wouldn't think. Like you might, oh, that was probably invented in New York City or Philadelphia or something like that. Like,
Right. I had no idea.
Idaho. Yeah. Or at least he was from Idaho. And then Cass, will you let us know where you're coming from? Like where your city and state is? Lives blocks away from the first street lit by light bulbs. That is a great scientific achievement. We'll talk a little bit more about why we're so
Wow.
interested in these Roselle Park, New Jersey. Why we're so interested in these scientific achievements, but I think these are two great, fantastic examples of like, hey, every community has somewhat what of a story, whether it's a famous inventor or a researcher, or even local science that's important to the communities. So those are both really awesome answers, and those would be perfect for the map we're trying to create of scientific achievements across America.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. It's always so
Yeah.
exciting. So just a quick nod to the project that's funding this webinar. The We Are Water project funded a traveling exhibition in the Four Corners region of the Southwestern US. So if you're not familiar with the Four Corners, it's where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico all come together. That we're all, pretty square shape states over here. And it's an incredibly unique region of the United States. It is very arid. The water is very scarce down there. I think depending on where you are in the region, you can get anywhere between like 9 to 12 and a half inches of rain annually, which is not a lot. And the whole purpose of this project has been to share stories and inspire conversations about water, what water means to communities. Not only does this region not have a lot of water, but there are so many diverse communities that live there that use water in very different ways. We have ranchers and farmers. We have conservationists. There are hunters and fishers, and there's a large indigenous community that has been there for centuries, living on this land with a deep understanding of the ecological systems, and have been able to thrive with very little water. And when other folks came in over the years in the 1500s, that was the Spaniards, in the 1800s, that was colonizers, like from the English, Americans coming from the colonies. There are so many different ways of using water and perspectives of using water, came to some conflicts that still exist in the region today. And so we wanted to use this project as an opportunity not to be divisive over water in the West, which is always going to be a tough subject when there's not a lot of water and more people moving here. What do we do with the water? How do we equitably distribute it to all communities and all different ways of life? But we wanted to instead come around this as a shared opportunity to really celebrate the ways in which people live in the Four Corners region, and celebrate our shared humanness of, we are water. We cannot exist with water. It is a part of us. It is who we are. We cannot survive without it. So this has been a really fun project that's been going on since 2020. And we are in about the final 6 months of it. So just excited to share with you all some resources from the project. And in the upcoming, event of our country, starting in 2026, it is the 250-year anniversary of America becoming what it is today, the United States of America. And so I know libraries across the country are doing America 250 celebrations of scientific achievements that have come from this country. And so we have a really fun project coming up called Science Across America that we would like to invite you to be a part of. But after working on the We Are Water project for the last, 5+ years, I couldn't help but say, science has been happening way longer than 250 years. People have been living here and understanding the land and making discoveries and inventions and innovations far beyond 250 years. So we wanted to celebrate a little bit of what has been, science prior to that. But I do want to talk a little bit about this Science Across America, because this webinar is sort of a mixed flavor of We Are Water and also this new campaign that we're launching. So this is a new campaign with our partners at Tanglebank Studios, HHMI Tanglebank Studios, and StarNet to help libraries highlight the history of scientific achievement in our country. So we're looking for 110 libraries right now. We're hoping for about 2 from each state, and we're looking for libraries from the territories as well, to participate.
I was just going to say that we also recognize we would love to get 2 libraries from each state and territory, but that doesn't always work out. Some states we might have to do an extra library in California if we don't get a ton from Rhode Island, or I shouldn't pick on Rhode Island, I don't know, a lower populated state. And also same with the territories. We've been lucky enough to get to do a lot of work with the territory libraries. I'm actually going to Saipan next week to do some work with them, but there's only one library in Saipan. There's only really one library system in Guam. So we're hoping for 2 from each state, but there's flexibility with that, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brooks, for saying that. Because we do have, like, California, it's possible we might even have more than 2. And but we're looking for approximately 110 total libraries to apply for this project. If selected, you would receive $500 just to put on programming and support your work in the project, a story wall display where you can run activities similar to what we did with the icebreaker, but with the patrons that are visiting your library, where they can be like, hey, you know what? My grandpa invented the liquid Band-Aid, and that was just down the road. True story. That's one of my best friends.
Oh, where'd you pull that one
grandfather
from?
invented the liquid Band-Aid, and she's always talking about it. But, all these different things that aren't necessarily in the textbooks, or, the big, like, oh yeah, of course, the Ford Model T by Henry Ford. That's something everyone knows, but we're looking for those quirky little things that occurred in your community. They'll also be receiving activity guides, community dialogue support, promotional materials, access to the award-winning HHMI Tanglebank Studio films, which will be showcasing American scientists throughout time and current days and what they're doing with their discoveries, and access to virtual programs hosted by Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, which is a super fun group. If you've never heard of them, I encourage you to Google them. We just had a virtual program with them a couple weeks ago, and it was so engaging, even though it's virtual. But this is not an exhaustive list. There's all kinds of other support you would be receiving from StarNet, as well as other, digital and tangible assets.
Yeah, and speaking of that, exploring by the seat of your pants. Again, yeah, we did some virtual programs just with a small group. We wanted to see how it went. They're all about, it was up close and personal with raptors with the Vermont Institute of Nature and Science, I believe. So we will be hosting 3 more programs with them, I think December 16th and 17th. Amy, if you don't mind popping those in the chat, those will be open to anybody to join. There's a YouTube live link. You could even, do questions and things like that. So yeah, please do check those out. Share those with some of your library friends. I know everybody, yeah, kind of burnt out on virtual programs after COVID, but these were really easy just to sit and watch and learn about some really fascinating birds, which is what these last ones were about. I'm not saying not the future ones won't all be about birds, but it'll just give you a good idea of kind of what those virtual programs look like.
Mm-hmm. Selected libraries will be expected to host 2 programs in the spring and summer of 2026. Host 1 community dialogue. This is an opportunity for you to gather more of those nuggets of science discovery and achievement within your community. So it's, invite the community in. We will give you a guide and some facilitation questions to help you host that dialogue. And just really learn more about the rich scientific achievement that's occurring right in your own backyard. You are expected to collaborate with at least 1 local partner. This could be a partner you're already working with. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. And then contribute 10 scientific achievements from your state. That many of those could come from that community dialogue. That will be hosted on a digital map that we're developing. So we're looking for the libraries to find these nuggets of achievement throughout the country that we will then host on a digital map. There's also some evaluation activities you'll be expected to participate in, but hopefully, we're hoping these things aren't much more than what you're already planning to do in your community. It's just, we're going to help give you the support and resources to go into this year, the 250th birthday of the United States. All right, so you can learn more about the project and how to apply at this link right here. It is included in that link bank that Amy has been dropping in the chat. So you'll learn a lot more about the project, the link to apply to the actual application. And just one more thing to note, the application is due December 27th. So that is this December. It's coming up pretty quick. So if you're interested, be sure to take a look at that. In that link on the screen right now, there's also, when you go into that, it's a blog. There's also a link to a recording of a webinar we just did yesterday that's all about how to apply. So if you want to hear more about like how we're going to score the applications and just more about the nitty-gritties of the project and how to apply, check out that recording from yesterday. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over a few free downloadable We Are Water resources, things that you can literally just click, download, put together as activities or take and make kits, podcasts, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to go through what we've been working on with We Are Water for the last 5 years. So first and foremost, our STEM Activity Clearinghouse. This isn't necessarily just related to We Are Water, but if you haven't heard of this, this is a website where we host over 500 hands-on STEM activities for pre-K through adult programming. So, and it ranges from topics from earth science to space science to citizen science. So check this out, share it with any of your programming librarians that are looking for ideas for what to do in the library. We do have a specific We Are Water collection. So when you go to the clearinghouse, you'll see this as the main page. And we have our featured collections, 8 featured collections, which are ongoing projects right now. And We Are Water is up there. So there's, I think, 29 water-related activities in that collection for you to check out. We'll be demonstrating 2 from that activity collection later today. All right, so this is another great website. This is from our partners at CU Boulder. They've been one of the main, project partners for this. So wearewater.colorado.edu/learn will take you to all kinds of fun stuff about water. So we have take and make kits, activities and lessons about water, water in the Western US online courses that you can that's great for adults or even just having in your computer lab if folks want to learn more about what's going on in the Four Corners. There's a Kahoot quiz that I shamefully failed when I did it the first time because that was started right at the beginning of this project. That quiz was made and I took the test thinking like, oh, I know this, but I've learned so much more since I've been a part of this project. There's videos about water in the Four Corners region, a virtual book club about water, stop motion animation workshop, and a couple other of activities like a We Are Water patch activity. That's great to do if you have partnerships with Scouts, Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. This is just a really fun one where you learn about water and then you can receive a patch at the end. And then conversation guides. So the conversation guides that were developed for this project are very similar to the community dialogues that we just mentioned that we're going to be doing for the Science Across America, but they're related to water as the main topic of conversation. So real quick, I'll talk about those take and make kits. There is Be a Water Historian activity where kids, there's discussion prompts and little note cards that kids can write down as they interview people in their lives. So they can interview their teacher, their family members, the librarian. But it's a really fun way to just start, figuring out, what is the history of water. And I'm sorry, I meant to be talking about Be a Water Historian, the third one over. That's the one where the kids interview somebody. I skipped ahead. Be a Water Historian. Oh, I have it labeled wrong. This is why I'm confused. Sorry. The first one there is Be a Water Detective. So this is a lot of fun where kids receive pH strips and they're able to test different solutions or water in their community. You can compare a river to tap water and see how the pH changes, and kids get to learn about water quality. And then there are some cultural ties in the end where it talks about basket weavers from this region, and the kids are able to use some of those pH strips to actually weave little baskets after they've had a chance to be a water detective. Sorry for that confusion. So that's Be a Water Detective versus Be a Water Historian. Be a Water Ecosystem Hero is a collaborative game where kids are learning about the ecosystem of native plants within the region and how native plants are incredibly important for battling water pollution. So this is a game basically where either everybody wins or everybody loses. So you're working together to make sure the native plants are still there and learning different ways to conserve native plants. The next one is waffle garden kits, which I'm going to go into a deeper dive a little bit later. So we'll save that for a few minutes. And then finally, these are super fun. You can download these coloring and activity books. We had so much, we created one at the very beginning of the project, and it was so popular at libraries that the graphic designer over at our partners at CU Boulder decided to make a second one. So these are really fun, beautiful images. You can download this in print it out in black and white and have them as coloring pages in your children's section. There's also Connect the Dots and mazes, a really fun activity book just to download for free and have on hand. All right, so I wanted to get that out of the way first. So if you're like, I'm just looking for things to do, those are the activities that you can just bookmark and go and save for your library. So if you have to leave the webinar to, go to the circulation desk, You have all the materials that we're hoping will be useful. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about a couple innovations of the Southwest. So acequias are centuries old irrigation systems. So these, some in the research I was doing, it says these can be traced back to over 10,000 years ago. So indigenous peoples of the Southwest of the Four Corners region were digging ditches to divert water to into their pueblos, into their waffle gardens, which we'll talk about later. But it was a way to create an irrigation system. And then in the 1500s, when the Spanish arrived, they had a similar ditch irrigation system that they were kind of bringing that technology over and that knowledge. And they took what was best of the acequias technology from the Spanish, which also, if you dig back even further, has Arab roots. But you have the melding of all these different cultures in arid environments and how they're managing water. And so the Spanish and the indigenous ways of ditch irrigation really morphed and combined, and is incredibly important to this day. There are about 700 acequias in New Mexico, and there's quite a few in Colorado as well. So these are community-based and community-operated systems, meaning that each acequias, the people in that community, they elect sort of like a mayor, someone to kind of direct how we're using this water. So it's very, it has a very democratic process, and it has some really deep social and spiritual traditions as well. So for example, in the spring, there's always the cleaning of the Acequias Madre, or the mother ditch, where folks come together. They do a lot of work to dig these out, clean them out, make sure they're really well maintained. And there's all sorts of efforts and blessings that go along with that process. It has a great ecosystem support. So the porous walls of the ditches of the acequias allow water to seep back into the ground. So in this method, it's recharging the groundwater, which means future generations will still have water. We're not just piping it all away somewhere else. It's going back into the ground. So it has a really amazing effect on the ecosystem. And as I said, even though these are 10,000 years old, they're still being used today, and there's ongoing legacy. So modern legislation is protecting these traditional systems, and they're incredibly important to the communities that use them. If you want to learn more directly from folks who live in the Four Corners region, we did collect stories in the form of a podcast, and you can find that in the We Are Water link in the link bank. But we have a couple of different stories that we captured, people talking about their experience growing up with the ditches, concerns for the future of the ditches with the ways that water is being managed now, but just some really rich stories from people who live in the region and work with the acequias. So check those out if you want to learn more. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Brooks to talk about another innovation.
Cool. Yeah, so we were, talking about different innovations and inventions and things like that from the Four Corners region. And Claire and I have talked a lot, we have a lot of stuff from our project that we've talked about for the past few years, but I was like, I want to find something new, something that was developed more recently. And I came across this really cool news article in the Durango Herald. So when I first moved to Colorado, I lived down in Durango and Mancos. And just to give you some context, it's a pretty small area. It is kind of Durango's like the hub for a lot of the Four Corners region, but it's still only a town of 20 to 30,000 people. So, people from Durango, if anybody's watching this, they might be like, oh, I know Eric Westover, the guy that invented this. But there is a ton of mountainous terrain nearby. You have the San Juan Mountains, the La Plata Mountains, which are part of the San Juans. But then all these like little hills. It's like kind of a mountain biking, hiking. I moved there honestly to work, but to do a lot of trail running. Just like this really awesome place for all these outdoor recreation activities. Unfortunately, that means a lot of people maybe get hurt or they get stuck in the backcountry. I've never been carried out on a gurney from a rolled ankle or anything like that, but I've seen people even up here in the Front Range. You're on a trail and you see somebody being kind of jostled down as they're on a gurney because maybe they've hurt themselves. So this gentleman, his name's Eric Westover. It's a really cool story. In 2003, he thought there's got to be a better way. And he invented this thing called the levitator, which has a lot of motorbike components like hydraulic disc brakes to kind of and big like rigid suspension, so that people can evacuate folks out of the backcountry in a much easier, much safer way. You can attach it to an ATV or a snowmobile. But then I was reading a little bit more about this guy. He invented this in 2003, and then in 2006, he himself suffered a traumatic brain injury. He was working on a truck or something like that. The truck fell on him. It damaged his brain really bad. He was in a coma for a long time. And he still, I don't think, speaks. He has difficulty speaking. He's, in a wheelchair. But his caretaker, they worked together to create a new version of the levitator that was way lighter, had newer components. It's supposed to be much, much safer. And so they developed this, nearly 20 years plus later, in 2024, 2025, and it's being adapted by search and rescue teams all across the country. So from Florida to Maine to the West Coast. And what I found was really cool is he's not doing it to make money. He sells them to these search and rescue organizations at cost. I think he was part of a search and rescue organization and just saw a really big need for this awesome invention with a really cool name too, the levitator. I don't know quite how it works. I think it's got a lot of hydraulics, a lot of suspension. But it just makes it a lot easier to get people out of the back country. And so, yeah, I took these pictures. The article I'll link there is from the Durango Herald, and these pictures came from the Durango Herald as well. But I wanted to talk about this too, as we talk about that Science Across America project and this idea of contributing ideas to a map. What that would look like with an invention or an achievement like this. So, Claire, if we go to the next slide, when we talk about submitting those achievements, this is kind of what we're looking for, right? So first, the name of the library that's contributing that information. I'm not a library. Yeah, so maybe the Durango Public Library might submit this. The scientific achievement, just give 1 to 2 sentences. So for this, I would say, this gentleman invented this really important device using updated technology to help evacuate people out of the backcountry and wilderness settings. Then you put the scientific achievement title. So for this, I would put the invention of the levitator. A hyperlink that cites the source or just gives people more information. This doesn't have to be like an academic scholarly paper. We see here, it can be anything from a university website to a Wikipedia webpage. I would probably include the Durango Herald article because I'm not sure if that invention has its own website. The location within the state or territory where it happened, so that one would be pretty easy. Durango, Colorado. The year that it took place. I guess with this one, I would say 2003 when he initially invented it. An image, if there is one available. So if I was doing this, I wouldn't pull those images from the Durango Herald without making sure that was okay with them. But in a small town like that, I bet you could just reach directly out to this gentleman or his caretaker and say, "Hey, do you mind if I use this image? We're contributing it to the a public library kind of project." And lastly, the type of science that this involves. So for this one, I would maybe say, it's an engineering thing, but medical science maybe would be more appropriate. You could choose two. And also, if it's an achievement that doesn't really fit inside those boxes, there's an other option to where you can list out that category. So this shouldn't take super long for those selected libraries that have to submit or we're asking to submit achievements. It's, like a 5 to 10 minute thing. But if you do, you have a local connection with that person or maybe, like I said, like in a small town like Durango, you could maybe reach out to that guy and say, "Hey, can I use a picture? Is there anything else you'd like to add about it?" And from there, who knows, maybe you have a fun library program that kind of comes out of that. Yeah, so just wanted to give a little example of something that, I just found, thought was really cool and that would probably, hopefully be a good fit for the map.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooks. That reminds me of when I was getting my wilderness first aid certification, and we had to like practice carrying people on just a
Yeah.
stretcher, and it was so difficult. I imagine that is going to be that invention, the levitator, could just really change the game, in wildlife rescue. So,
Mhm.
or wilderness rescue. Awesome. So another innovation from the Southwest is something called waffle gardening. So this is another centuries old agricultural technique that is still being used today. The activity I'm going to be talking about was actually co-developed by someone who is a member of the Laguna Pueblo, who does waffle gardening every single year, seed saving, and it's really incredible. And it will definitely be, continued to be used for generations to come. But essentially, a waffle garden is almost exactly what it sounds like, except you're not growing waffles, but you're growing crops that are planted in rows of square cells so that they resemble the shape of a waffle. And as I said, they're still being used today, often combined with ditch irrigation, like the Acequias. So in an area where there is not a lot of water, this is a really great way to minimize evaporation. So essentially what you're doing when you're planting those crops in those little cells, the water gets directed, it kind of pools in those cells instead of being dispersed across the surface of the water, of the soil, which will very quickly evaporate. Instead, it's getting directed right down to the roots of the plants. So the plants are getting as much water as possible without it disappearing through evaporation. Absolutely genius and incredibly effective for growing even very crops that need quite a bit of water, types of melons, corn, beans. I was incredibly impressed when Kyle Swimmer, he's the one who helped us create this, he co-developed this activity with us. When he was sharing the list of crops that he grows, it truly is incredible how just such a simple modification to the soil can be really, really beneficial. So with Kyle's help, we developed take and make kits called waffle garden kits. So these are, it's a way for not only kids to learn about what waffle gardens are and how they've been used throughout history and still today, but it's a bit of a science experiment as well. So if you were to put this together, you would need 2 rectangular containers for planting. Think of just a windowsill container. So this is meant to be done indoors year round. You don't need to be only doing this in the spring or the summer. Seeds, craft sticks, which are going to be what you're using to collect some data, really simple data, data sheets, activity instructions, and soil. So all of these kit materials are listed in the Waffle Garden activity, which is linked in that link bank. And the way it works is, so since you have 2 containers, you're going to be comparing the difference of how much you need to water a little garden that does not have the waffle shapes versus the garden that does have the waffle shapes. So step 1 is you just fill your containers with soil, make sure they have drainage at the bottom, and fill one all the way to the top and just leave it like that. With the second one, you're going to fill it to the top, and then just with your hands, create those little waffle shaped cells, just little depressions, within the container. Next, you're going to plant the seeds, and the activity guide has instructions for, how many seeds to plant where. And then over the course of the next couple of weeks, you're going to irrigate and test. So after, you're going to water it. The next morning, you're going to take the craft sticks that are, again, included in the activity materials, and you're just going to stick it into the soil for about 30 seconds, pull it out, and it's just like if you're baking brownies and you want to see if they're ready, and you take a toothpick and you stick it in the middle of the batter. If it comes out crumbly, in this case, it means you don't need to water it. There's enough moisture on that stick and in the soil. There's enough moisture in the soil to make it stick to the craft stick. So, hey, you can wait a whole nother day to water. If after you pull the craft stick out and it's bone dry, it tells you need to water. So really simple way to do some scientific testing and observations. You can record your observations on the included data collection sheet. And essentially what you'll see over time is you need to water the waffle garden much less than the one that you did not create those cells. So fun way to learn about the history of waffle gardens, and also grow a little garden yourself. All right, I'll pass it back over to Brooks for our last water activity.
Oh yeah, thank you, Claire. And sorry, I was just realizing my slides for these are pretty bland, but this is not a bland activity. This is a really fun one. This is called low-tech water filter. The idea here is that a lot of money, a lot of resources go into a municipal or a countywide water filtration plant. But you are able to actually do some water filtration just with kind of common household items or even items you found in nature. And you can kind of see that process play out. We do have many warnings on this activity guide not to ever drink this water, no matter what. It's not going to be clean enough for you to drink. But it does kind of help visualize what something like a cheesecloth versus cotton balls versus aquarium gravel and what that can do in terms of water filtration. I put a link to the how-to video up there. It's a pretty simple activity. It can last, it's maybe a 15 to 30-minute activity. It's kind of an engineering design challenge. So some of your patrons might want to do this for a little bit longer. I'll provide some details on the next slide. But also, I want to say that there's another activity that you can pair this with. It's called Who Dirtied the Water? That is not an engineering design challenge. It's more of like a role-playing activity where you read off kind of a poem about the template they give you, I think, is maybe about Massachusetts and the Boston Harbor and the history of kind of water pollution there and how maybe at one point the water was clean, but over time, as more people settled and colonized that area, different pollutants kind of affected the water quality. So there's a template where you can make that more appropriate for your own region. And then that other activity, Who Dirtied the Water, you're reading off things you're saying like, well, in the 70s, I'm just making this up, more car washes were put in the city or more laundromats, and that decreased the water supply. And as you read that off, your patrons will pour a tiny little cup of like detergent in the water, swirl it around, and then you ask a question like, would you want to swim in this water? Would you want to drink this water? So it's a really fun kind of almost like a story time activity where you're making dirty, gross water. I say it's a great add-on activity to low-tech water filter because then you have your dirty, gross water that you can then filter out with the low-tech water filter activity. Let's go to the next slide, Claire. I think I have some, instructions here. So you can see in this little screenshot I took, the top is my gross, nasty water. There's coffee grounds, mud, soap, all types of stuff. And there's some rubber. And then in the bottom bin are some of the materials that I was using for that low-tech water filter. It's really easy to set up. You just take a 2-liter bottle or a large water bottle. You kind of cut the top third off, unscrew the lid, twist it over, and then there you have your kind of filtration device, right? And so with that upside down bottle top half, that's where you'll start loading your different materials. So, in the activity guide, we give some recommendations, things like what isn't like shredded coconut husk or something like that, cotton balls, coffee filters, cheesecloth, aquarium gravel, things like that. But you could really use anything. I've did a version of this activity back when I lived in Durango. I was working at a nature center, and we would do it with only natural items, only things you could find outside. And then see who kind of had the cleanest water. So yeah, you stack it up, you make your layers. You could put some type of limitation. You could say you can only use 3 materials. There's versions where you create a budget. Each item is a certain amount of money, and you have to stay within the budget. I like to do it a little bit more open-ended than that. And then you test, right? So you scoop some dirty water, you pour it on, you compare what it looked like when it went in, and you compare with what it looked like when it came out. I guess you could make it a competition. Not everybody responds well to competition, but if you wanted to see who could get their water the cleanest, that's totally something you could do. And then if you have time, you could do a second round, you could do a third round. Again, let that engineering kind of mindset of building off of what you learned the last time. It can get a little messy, right? So, if you can do it outside, that's great. Or really, I have like a big plastic tray that I set down and like to do it on. So again, we have links in the link bank for that. If you go to the clearinghouse and just search water filter, it'll pop up. There's a how-to video. There's some long like teacher guides and implementation guides for that. It's a pretty simple activity though, and it kind of it gets to that idea of like, well, you don't have to have millions of dollars of equipment to just do some water filtration. You kind of get your mind wrapped around those processes.
Great. Well, we are at the discussion portion. So I hope you enjoyed listening to some of the innovations from the region over here and can find some use for some of those activities. But I'd love to hear from you at this point. Looks like we only have 15 minutes left, so this doesn't have to be a very long discussion. But I'd love to hear from you. How are you planning to celebrate contributions to science from your community? Or if you haven't planned anything like that, did this spark any ideas of how you can incorporate uh, the inventions from your region? You know, the first lit up street lamps. You know, like how might you incorporate things like that into your library programming? Feel free to think about it for just a moment and answer in the chat.
Claire, I was just thinking one thing I like in, maybe smaller, more rural communities, is sometimes it's easier to amplify those scientists or those STEM workers who are doing things that maybe aren't as like okay, maybe they're not like a top academic research, but they're responsible for maintaining the water quality, or they work in the sanitation department and they have a really big important role. One of the best talks I've heard, we were in Palau for a conference, and somebody from their sanitation department came to talk about their composting efforts and the really unique situations that they have to deal with, given their soil, given their climate, and things like that. And he's like, "Oh, I'm just a sanitation worker," but he had really, really awesome information to share. Uh,
That is really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, my 4-year-old son is obsessed with garbage trucks right now, and he's always waving at them as they drive by. And I'm always like, they are so important for public health. Like, always, let's be grateful and thankful for our sanitation workers.
So Catherine says, I haven't planned anything. Like to get with our children's programmer. Oh, nice. And talk about some of the ideas I've heard about today. Yeah, Catherine. I know it's just kind of getting on people's radar right now that, the America Science 250 kind of idea. I think we it's just, but I know libraries are always planning way far in advance. I know a lot of places are doing kind of programs around the 4th of July and trying to focus on that. But I think it's a great thing that you could do all year long. And really, honestly, outside of next year too, like in the future, like it's always a great thing to celebrate your community's scientific achievements. Cass says, we often partner with a local astronomical society for stargazing programs. Yeah, we love that. So we're definitely going to do that again, but this webinar gave me a few ideas to bring more Earth science to our programming too. Very nice. And let's see, Cass, you were in New Jersey. Were you able, were both of you, I guess, able to see the aurora? What was it, like 3 weeks ago? I'm gonna guess Catherine probably had really. Oh no, it was
Oh man.
the second night for us. I went on like a nighttime, a long run at night, hoping I'd get to be out in the wilderness and like be able to see it, and it was so cloudy. But the first night I got to go see it in my backyard.
Yeah, I'm a little too close to Denver. I went out and I tried taking pictures of the sky with my phone because everyone said that's how you can see it. But I am only about 10 minutes like from downtown Denver. So the light pollution just made it still on my
Yeah.
bucket list. Haven't checked that one off yet.
Claire, I drove like 15 minutes outside of Longmont and I started texting my next door neighbors and being like, hey, the aurora's out right now. You should go check it out, once in a lifetime kind of thing. You're going to have to drive pretty far away from Longmont to go see it. And then they sent me back pictures from their backyard being like, I don't know, it's better here. And I was like, why did I drive? So I came back and it was still popping off. Very cool. Well, it sounds like, yeah, it's like probably some of the ideas are just starting to percolate. But
Yeah.
yeah, keep in mind it doesn't have to be, we hear a lot about really important science that happens, the development of vaccines and big achievements that most people know about. But it's cool to hear about like some of those lesser known achievements and or things that you wouldn't expect to be happening in your backyard. One of our advisors that we work with in Michigan. I'm going to forget what animal it was, but he was talking about,
Jaguars.
yeah, he said Michigan is home to some really amazing jaguar research, which you wouldn't expect. It's not like jaguars live there, but they collect the data and then it's all kind of researched and analyzed and processed in Michigan. So yeah, there's all types of connections that I think it kind of helps people learn and know that like science is all around us. There are people all around us doing amazing science. It could be your next
Mhm.
door neighbor, you know?
Yeah, and um, Catherine, to your point of like you're an adult librarian, talking with the children's librarian about how to incorporate this. What we're doing with the Science Across America is we're trying to make it a multi-generational, engaging program. So some of the prompts we have for that story wall are really more, we have some geared towards adults about, what are the memories you had of, things like the moon landing or things like that, where adults can really like think about what they've experienced. But then for younger kids, we're trying to come up with prompts about forward thinking, like, draw what you think the town will look like in another 250 years. And what are some ideas you have to make the world a better place? So there's really so many different angles you can go at it, with different audiences. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's a small group too. So I'll just say, like, we have a ton of resources. Sometimes I think we would be a little better served to have them more organized. So if you, Cass or Catherine, you're looking for resources on adult programming or multi-generational programming, and you're like just not finding it or having a hard time navigating our website, just email Claire or myself, and we'd be happy to point you in the right direction. I'll just,
Yeah. We're always happy to jump on a call too on Zoom, just one on one and chat through your ideas. So
yeah,
consider us. We do these webinars, but we also love to get one on one with folks to just
I know.
brainstorm.
We're lucky enough to get to do trainings all around the country and virtually about, best practices in public libraries. But then I have to stop sometimes and think, I don't actually work in a public library. It's really the
Mhm.
ideas from y'all that I'm stealing
Yeah.
to go share with
Yes.
everybody, um, which luckily libraries like to steal from each other. Ideas, not books.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I really like that it was a smaller group today, but we will absolutely be posting the recording, like I said, on our website. So feel free to share it with any colleagues that you think might benefit from this. And yeah, just reach out to us. Our contact information is in the link bank. Reach out to us if you want to chat more about anything. All right. And with that, I hope you all have a great day.
Bye, everybody.